Hello, cooking enthusiasts. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. I don't have a super specific procedure to give you, more of a concept with some examples. At a larger scale, I want to talk about home cheese making in general and how to kind of modify it to make it a bit more reliable, maybe, or at least more approachable. Because one of the problems with home or hobby cheese making is that for most people, especially in North America, it's impossible to get raw milk. Now, I am not like a super huge raw milk advocate. I think that's a whole separate discussion when it comes to general human consumption of something like that. But I do know from experience and research that raw milk, or at least the less processed milk is, the better it works for cheese making. And I think with cheese making, raw milk is generally pretty safe. Another problem with home cheese making is that there are so many different types of rennet, which is the enzyme used in most cheese making procedures, and they all behave slightly differently and they interact with your different milk differently, which makes it very complicated and a little bit unpredictable. And the final issue is the cultures that most people use for home cheese making, which are the freeze-dried cultures and spores, which I have become a bit convinced about being not just the best option for actually making really good cheese. Obviously, for many projects, I have used store-bought, freeze-dried spores and other cultures, but I think with cheese making in particular, there is something to be said from the traditional way of trying to cultivate certain microbes so you have a really complex and stable environment for your cheese. And basically, what this video is about is taking that concept of your own cultivated microbes and expanding it beyond the realm of standard dairy cultures. The fact that my Parmesan cultured cream works is a good example of this. So now, let's finally turn to ricotta and my concept of fermented ricotta, which I'm sure someone has done, but I personally haven't really seen it before. Now, theoretically, you could apply this concept to even store-bought ricotta, but again, I sort of developed this as a beginner cheese-making experiment. One of the advantages of ricotta is that it is a bit easier to make in my experience. Again, you may still need to do some trial and error to find a procedure that works for you. You still need to find a milk that is not ultra high temperature pasteurized, but other forms of pasteurized milk will work. The other advantage of ricotta is that it does not use rennet, but instead uses acid and relatively high temperatures to coagulate. My preference for coagulation is citric acid, but you can also use regular lemon juice or distilled vinegar. Again, there are a number of procedures online that you can look around for. The acid and the relatively high temperatures make the curdling process a bit more intense, which is why I believe it works with less ideal milk. And of course, the curdling procedure used in ricotta is going to kill any microbes in the milk, which is why it's not normally fermented in comparison to rennet-based cheeses, which are only very slightly warmed up, which is why I came up with the concept of adding the culture to the cheese after coagulation. Again, very different from most rennet-based cheese-making procedures. So, the basic concept is you make ricotta however you find it easiest, and then you mostly drain the whey from the curds. Again, we want to get rid of too much excess acidity that's going to be in the whey, but I'm not super concerned about getting it really dry at this point. You then let your ricotta curds mostly cool down before putting them into a container with a cultured brine. And for me, this brine is essentially the juice of a fermented product like kimchi or preserved lemons. So you blend those sources of culture with water and strain them to get a relatively clear brine liquid. I then let the ricotta curds sit in the brine at room temperature for at least a day or two, making sure they're thoroughly combined and submerged. In my experience, they tend to swell up and break down a little bit, resulting in a creamier texture. But after only a few days of fermentation, you can then drain the curds again and get the ricotta to your desired moisture level. Right after fermentation, most of my experiments were very flavorful and tangy, of course, also influenced by whatever I used as the culture source. But even after only a week or so in the fridge, I got some interesting flavor development, although again, it's going to be very random. My main examples are, of course, variations of lactic acid bacteria, but there's a number of other dairy cultures and other ferments you could attempt. Obviously, research fermentation or only attempt this if you have certain experience. Keep things well salted and well acidified, and if you see any danger signs, just throw out the cheese. But I think this is a really fun concept for exploring what different microbes do in the context of dairy. Again, a bit of a non-standard video, but if you have any questions about this fermented ricotta concept, please let me know in the comments, and definitely let me know if you try something like this yourself. Otherwise, thank you for watching.